and myself, Rob McLaren, the author of the Joubert series. Hello, Dominic Fielder.
Hello, Rob. How are we?
I'm superb. I'm superb. Every month at the Rally Point, we catch up with friends to enjoy the Napoleonic period. Now, everyone, we're recording the first 30 minutes of the gathering, but once the recording is over, we remain online and the conversation continues. And this month, we'd like to welcome a whole bunch of guests to Rally Point to wrap up the year 2023 and get excited about 2024. Over to you, Dominic.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Now, I want to start this off by thanking everybody who's turned up this evening. But actually, I want to thank Rob before we get started, because this year I met Rob for the first time, face to face. And when I came away, I was so taken by such a wonderful human being, lovely stories. And when I had to describe him to my friends, I said, I've met the Australian Jack Reacher. There he is, large as life. Now, to everybody else who's been along, what we're going to do this evening, in a packed program, it was two Ronnies like. We're going to speak to some of the guests we've had, but also those patient individuals behind the microphone who sat there and listened to us banging on. And then when the recording stopped, they got with far more interesting questions than I could ever have thought of. So I'm going to say, first of all, Dr. Martin Boycott-Brown, how's your Napoleonic year been? And looking forward, views on the film of the year coming up.
Highlight of my year, my Napoleonic year, was undoubtedly meeting Rob. He came to see me.
There's £10 well spent, Rob. There you
go. And we had a very interesting time looking around that lost area of Britain, East Anglia, discussing all kinds of things to do with what Joubert might do, where he might go, how he might get there, and so on and so forth, and much more besides, of course. So it was very, very good to be able to meet up, very good indeed, and I'm very glad that we managed it. So that was the highlight of my year. Apart from that, I'm a kind of imposter here in a way, because I suppose I could say that I was a Napoleonic enthusiast when I was about 20, but the interest sort of went onto the back burner and didn't come back until much later in life. And I then spent, as I've said to people, about 8 years studying 1 year of Napoleon's life, and there was a yes, yeah, that's it. There was a time when I knew much more about 1 year of Napoleon's life than any sane or sensible person really ought to know. But then I moved on to other things, and I really didn't touch Napoleonic stuff for about 20 years at all. And it's partly Rob who's kind of brought it to the surface again, which is why I'm here. But what with my impending dementia and I don't know what else, I find it difficult to remember what I was doing all those years ago and what I actually discovered. So I have to go and read my own book to find out what I knew, because I've forgotten so much of it. However, the film, my God, what can you say? I saw the representation of Austerlitz with the cannon fire and people falling through the ice, and I thought, yeah, very dramatic. It's all you need is flying saucers coming in to make it more realistic, really.
I think that's the director's cut.
Yeah, yes, yeah. I thought to myself, historians all over the world are going to be shooting themselves because they're going to have to put up with a whole lot of mythology, extra mythology that we could have done without. You know, people have been trying to make Napoleon into a kind of real person who did real things, and you know, this is not going to help. So, yeah, not looking forward to it, shall we say? That's me. Over to somebody else.
Well, Hans Garl, it was lovely to meet you earlier this year, and I'm still looking forward to reading your work that you sent me on Prussian light infantry. Genuinely will be one of my high points of next year. But you and Napoleon year so far, how's it been? Please don't say meeting Rob, because if I just hear that from one more person, you know, I'm sure it is meeting Rob, but the second thing in your Napoleonic year.
Yeah, well, I discovered podcasts, I have to say, and like Zoom meetings like this, which I enjoy because it's one of the rare occasions where you can have communication with other enthusiasts. And sometimes you can talk to very professional people like Alexander Mikaberidze or Charles S. Dale. It's quite good, I think, to have feedbacks from us amateurs, because we shouldn't let the professionals take the field, because they're sometimes not as professional as they look like. And I'm in vain battling some agendas like pronunciation of names, or like you know, the Battle of Arcola, which did not exist. It's Arcolay, or say it like the French, Arcole, maybe, or like the Battle of Auerstadt, which doesn't exist. It's Auerstedt. But you can bring these topics up 100,000 times, they get ignored. But I keep on grinding, and like other aspects, like about Prussian infantry, that they couldn't fight in villages and all that nonsense stuff. So I'm able to at least talk to an English audience from a German point of view. Yeah, and otherwise it was nice to meet you all, and of course I have to say it again to Rob, drinking smoke beer in Bamberg. And showing him the place where Berthier fell out of the window. So
Yes.
we connected historical fact with also social ones. And I think the hobby should be has a social aspect as well. And it's nice so that we have such a nice social chat. So hopefully next year we go on and we'll have good time again. About the film, well, it's just for entertainment, you know. It's for me, it's not a big deal. The big deal is that all of a sudden the director, what's his name, Ridley Scott, is such an expert about Napoleonic times. He gets interviewed. He read maybe one book or two, and now everybody takes it for face value what he's saying. The same thing about the actor of Bonaparte. They're now top specialists. You don't need to read books any longer. Just listen to their opinions. And then you will know how Napoleonic time and the life of Napoleon Bonaparte was. And there will be, I feel there's some new wargaming miniatures coming up. Napoleon the ear clutcher, you know, before he's firing the guns, he has to clutch his ears because he's afraid of the gun noise. A gunner like Napoleon Bonaparte, you know, yes. I'm afraid when a gun is blazing off. This is hilarious. And it's for me like a bit Monty Python, really, like when the tops of the pyramids get fired with artillery. And so I see it more like a comedy, I have to say. But the bad thing will be that a lot of facts, like with the same thing with Sharp, you know, spitting bullets into a red-hot barrel of a musket, they will come up in wargaming miniatures and in discussions, instead of saying just this is a film of edutainment and just have fun watching it. And hopefully it will have some exciting stuff, and it will also, I'm quite sure, drag people into the topic. I mean, like the same with me when I watched the Waterloo film. So I got quite interested after watching the film into history. So always two sides. So that's for me. I'm not that negative, but on the other hand, it's quite hilarious, I have to say.
Well, I wonder, obviously we're all planning to live much longer now, that if we're looking back in 50 years' time, if we have the same warm enthusiasm for, the Ridley Scott Napoleon the musical that we have for the 1970 film, my money's on probably not. But I look forward to next year and just annoying you all the time with my mispronunciation of all things German and being corrected. Please feel free to, but also just tapping into your knowledge for all things Prussian. That is going to help my little war games collection. Now, so to the gentlemen who've waited patiently behind the microphone, put up with Rob's waffling on about and mine occasionally. I'm going to go first to Al. Normally, Al does have the strangest collection of hats. He's hatless today, so it's hatless Al from New Zealand. Al, your Napoleonic year. How's it? Oh, there you go. He's never more than a yard away from a Napoleonic hat. I'm relieved. Al, do you want to come put yourself off mute? Tell us about your Napoleonic year.
Right. Yeah, we're misbehaving a bit today, but never mind. Having not met Rob in person, I can say that my highlight is the fact that I've got a certain book. I've deliberately not opened it. It's just sitting there in reserve. So it'll be closer to the next one. There'll be less gap the next when I get back into it. Otherwise, a couple of medium-sized games, a Borodino and a Leipzig game with about 6 or 8 other players in a little town. The host is a guy who used to be in the military, spent 4 years in Moscow, so he's probably the most well-travelled Borodino person in New Zealand. And we were just using the new Perry's-inspired Valor and Fortitude rules, which is a loose version of Black Powder, which has been developed, I think, for sort of like one-day big exhibition games. So
yeah,
it was quite a reasonable little experience, and that's probably about it. And I've managed to avoid the film so far. When I see the charging loose cavalry scene, I go, oh yeah, this is Hollywood. And somebody said to me, oh, did you know that Napoleon blew the face off or the nose off the Sphinx? I'm going, oh, I wonder what book that's in.
I think the version in New Zealand will have orcs.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
And
I think it's compulsory. Under New Zealand legislation.
Yeah.
I just went to check that out. How big is the wargaming scene in New Zealand? That's I'm not that I'm popping over for a game, but
yeah.
Are there many of you out there?
Well, today there's something happening in the capital, Wellington, called Call to Arms, and it'll have about 100 people at it. So yeah, there's a few games. And tomorrow we've got a modest-sized bold action World War II club game, about 12 people participating in a little mini tournament. But
it sounds like it's alive and well. I want to have that image of you wearing your hat into the next game that you go to. I'm going to carry that with me. It will warm me up into next year. Next person who's patiently behind. Now, one of my favorite things about Mark, not only obviously is he a KC, and therefore I'm going to get cheap legal advice at some point, which I'll cash in on shamelessly. But is that we once had a rally point where we waited and waited for Mark. We're doing things, and they just logged on the last 5 minutes. And he spent a long time getting his sound set up, just in time for Rob to say, and that's it for today. So, Mark, apart from that, which we won't mention ever again, and Rob can edit this out because he's got the gear to do that. How's your Napoleon year been, and what are you looking forward to in the great fest that will be Napoleon II this time?
I think my life in military history is a little bit like Martin's experience. I probably charted my life's course by particular battles, particular generals, particular periods that have caught my eye. And also, like Martin, my real Napoleonic passion started probably 40 odd, nearly 50 years ago. And over the last couple of years, I've rediscovered it. And particularly this year, part of the way that I rediscovered it was through Rob's books and your books, Dominic. And it's always good after reading some heavy history to read something that's a little lighter, a little frothier, but there's always a bit of substance to it. So that's been great. The big highlight in terms of a war game experience was I organised a 15-player refight of Waterloo. I mean, we're just doing the eastern side of the battle, and the personality of generals is something that I always think is a fascinating part of military history, and sometimes people underestimate it. And one of the things I tried to do as the organiser of the game was to cast the generals in the way that I thought would reflect the best historical performance of it. So it wasn't necessarily the most brilliant general was Napoleon, but certainly the most aggressive one was Thielmann of First Corps of the Prussian Army. And it really played out very well. It was a simple black powder game, which is not a hard or heavy rule set to play, but it demonstrated also the friction of command and how particular generals don't actually comply with their orders. It's not necessarily a lost courier, it's just someone loses their head, in my view. As Rob's said, we're going to play a big Lingy game in the first week of December, and it's going to be a smaller battle than the Waterloo game. But when I was talking to Rob about it, Rob showed me this fascinating photo of the bridge at Lingy over the Ling. Now, like probably everyone who's read it, I've got this vision of a beautiful Gothic bridge with arches, something like the bridge at Remagen from the film. But then to see the bridge, and Rob showed me this fascinating photo of a park bench, and that's the width of the bridge. Talk about myth, Martin. That really exploded all of my concepts of that particular action. I'm also a bit trepidatious about the movie. I still have flashbacks to Ridley Scott's Alexander movie. I went to see that with some mates after a War Games convention. We'd had a very fine dinner, perhaps a bottle of red too many. I probably decided the best reaction to the film was to try to sleep through it. My friends who had no mercy kept waking me up so I could share their pain. So, look, I hope Hans Carter's right, and it brings a lot of enthusiasm to the period, and that's probably good. I mean, when we look at ourselves on screen, we're an ageing population of Napoleonic enthusiasts. So if it brings some bright-eyed teenagers into the period, perhaps in 50, 60 years, they'll be running Rally Point. So I think it'll ultimately be a good thing, but I'm going to have to grit my teeth a bit.
All right, thank you very much, Mark, for that. And I look forward to all our adventures next year. And eventually, my aim is to get over to Australia and again, to shamelessly haunt me around from place to place and play a lot of war games. But I think that's an adventure for years ahead. Don in Sydney, you sat there looking tanned and healthy. How's your Napoleon year been? And the film, is it going to be a hit or a miss?
So thank you very much, Dominic. You're all too kind. So Rob and I met many, many years ago. So as a young lad in Australia, I had Airfix toy soldiers. I had some games from Avalon Hill. And my friends, of course, had far more of all of those than I did. So I got into wargaming. Then I joined the army, as again Rob did as well, and I had the fortune to do a couple of degrees, did a master's at War Studies in King's, had the opportunity to work with people like Gunther Rottenberg, who all of us would know and probably have a few of his books on our shelves. And as I've gotten a little bit older, and then Rob started to get into his real passion, which is these books, I've gone full circle and I've gotten back into both games and the history and enjoying what I do now that I won't say I'm retired, but I certainly don't put the amount of hours into the day that I should anymore. So my Napoleon year has been really good because it's revitalized for me as a person who grew up in the same milieu as all of us, back into reading about Napoleonic history, looking at the games I've got, occasionally playing them, because having games and playing games are two separate hobbies, and then enjoying the company of people who also enjoy the same stories and the same conversations about history. So mine's been a really good year. I'm looking forward to next year even more, and I'm loving listening to the stories around this table because it's inspiring me to do things about my books or my games. And I haven't seen the film. I don't have an opinion. I'm not that sensible. I can't even ride a horse, so I'll listen to other people tell me what they think about the movie. But when somebody described horses crashing through the ice and it wasn't Aylau, but it was some other battle, I thought, is somebody mixing their histories here?
I think
Thanks,
we
Dom.
all can't wait. Mark, good evening to you, Mr. Middleton.
Well, what can I say? So for my Napoleonic year, as every Napoleonic year has been for me since 1998, when I got into my hobby, which is a historical reenactment, was fairly good. Let's say that being the chairman of two associations, you get the feeling when you've been doing it for as long as I have that the world can really be divided into two sorts of human beings: locomotives and wagons, basically. So you've got people who get the job done, make sure the group's turning over, making sure the admin process is being complied, trying to get people excited, etc. for what's coming up, getting people to events, making sure that everybody's got the equipment, making sure everybody's got any visa if necessary or requirements, any musket permits, etc. And when you end up going there, you realize half the people who've promised to come don't turn up. So you start to think, is it really worth it? And you always get, during the year, I always get to the point where, okay, I've done this for long enough now. I've put in a good shift. I'm going to quit and basically pass on to pass the baby, as we say, on to someone else, someone else, and I'm going to take more of a back seat. And then something miraculous happens, and it fills me up with a determined feeling to carry on, and like an idiot I sign up again for the next year, and I've been doing this since 1998. This year the highlight for me was the successful organizing of an immersive campaign event around Paris, which is a reenactment which is not made for the public. It's made for us. The battlefield's 20 square kilometers. We don't know where the enemy is. We have set rules of engagements, and then afterwards we spend the next 2 days trying to find each other, trying to corner each other, etc. So that was good. And we almost got our first Australian participant to come, but he had to cancel at the last minute for personal reasons, which was a great shame. Apart from that, working with Rob this year has been also an interesting new experience with the getting the books into French. For me, it's challenged my professional life as a translator. This is not contract law. This is not court documents. This is not translating permits or whatever that form. This is more literal. So it sort of tapped into when I tried my hand at writing 10 years ago. It's reignited that somewhat, even though I now fully realize I'm not on the same level as Rob or other writers. And that more or less sums it up, really. So it's been a fairly good year. Lots of new things, same old, but just like life, I would say. And just to comment about that film, I'm personally not going, having watched I'm sure it will be a great cinematic experience, as most of Ridley Scott's films are. However, I'm that sort of person that's going to sit there during every military scene and say, nope, nope, no way. So I'm not the best to go. The rest of it, I would probably enjoy. However, the whole Battle of Austerlitz in the extracts we've seen, in the trailer that we've seen, as soon as I've seen cannons getting, hey, you know, off goes a top, I've got cannons, and then everybody dying in a lake, even though at Austerlitz, where this scene is supposed to take place, none of that stuff happened, and apparently they only dragged out 20 bodies through after when they drained that swamp a few years after the battle. So for me, I'm going to probably pass and let other people enjoy it for what it is, I suppose. So that's it. That's it for me, basically.
Well, I'm very envious of the collaboration that you and Rob have going on with the translation into French. I can also say that Rob's £10 note that he's been passing around must be tied on a very long piece of string, because there seem to be a lot of people who've liked meeting them this year. So, but perhaps that's just the effect of the man. So, Rob, over to you. Now, obviously, apart from we'll take me out of the equation. Your your Napoleonic year today, how's it been? What are we looking forward to in next year on Rally Point? And also, where are you going with the film? What do you think it's going to do?
Well, thank you very much. I might start with the film and give my warmest thanks to Mr. Ridley Scott for doing a wonderful promotion for both Jobert and the King's German series. I think he's just delightful that he's gone out there and spent the last of my £10 and cut the string and put that film together. I think each of us who has written a paper, who has compiled a book, as Martin has, you and I who write our narrative, you're trying to get a feel. And I think now, if we don't like a movie, well, then go and find a couple of million and make your own. And we can all agree it's going to be wonderfully outrageous, the movie. It's going to create all sorts of exciting things. Obviously, it was Jobert who shot the nose off the Sphinx, not Napoleon. But, I think Ridley Scott's trying to give us a feel for a phenomenal human and the many aspects of that. And everybody staggers out thinking, what can we do next? So behind myself and my friend Peter Cross at Waterloo are two young historians. One, Jonas Deneef. He's a professional librarian. And the point of here is young men, young people coming through. Jonas Deneef, just recently married to a beautiful Singaporean lady. Librarian, is translating vast amounts of French memoir into English, and well worth getting his wonderful series of books. It probably didn't come up there. The other young gentleman is Simon. Simon is an up-and-coming Keith Rocco style artist. I don't know if you can see there a chasseur gift from Simon to me. So young people are out there, and I was going to show this photo. Here at the field of Leipzig, we've got Mark Middleton, Sergeant, Eagle standard bearer. In the center of the line reforms, we can see beyond Mark the Russian troops at Leipzig beginning to form across the field, and around him are surrounded young men beginning to enjoy the period. So I wouldn't have too many concerns about participation. I think that's really strong and really exciting. Here we are. 2024. I'm climbing this little Napoleonic Everest. I'm trying to put out a 20-book series. Writing basically one story in 20 volumes of a professional soldier. So my year is about writing. Behind me, you can see sabers. So down here, I've been learning to rapier fight. This year, I graduate onto sabers. I'm had the opportunity to visit the company Antique in France, and I, as a soldier doing ceremonial drill, the carriage of a sword, etc. Now you have one dragging behind you and tripping you up while you're trying to saddle a horse, as I tried to do recently, let alone getting on it and drawing a saber. You know, holding reins and reaching down to try and find a saber and put your sword not over your wrist. That always fascinates me, how smoothly that appears on movies, but it's an absolute embuggerance, like all soldiers using their equipment, let alone trying to do anything with that. So I've actually purchased shako, because as I'm beginning to understand how to get that wrist flick, to get blade tip, to get speed, am I going to knock my hat off? Watching Leipzig, wonderful, because you can see gunners do the real job. They just fire their guns. That's real. The infantry, hard or mostly real because they're firing their muskets, but the bayonet charge and the melee is all good fun. But the people who do the least amount of work would be the cavalry, because they can't actually go and perform their skills in a reenactment, but you know, breaking squares and because of all of the appropriate hindrances and safety, etc. So it was so I couldn't get it. It was wonderful to be at Leipzig and to stand on, basically standing on a wargaming table. Wonderful. And so yes, it's been the most amazing year, and looking forward to more of the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. That's mine has been, since we sort of was saying just before we started, since we sort of concocted the idea for Rally Point, is just where we're going with this. I'm very excited by what's ahead. We've talked about some of the guests privately. We talked about some of the guests for next year, and there are a few others as well that we're working on. It's been brilliant. I mean, genuinely brilliant to just find new friends. That's the best thing about this. That's what it feels like. New friends, people that if you walked into somewhere, you could just pick up a conversation with them because of what we're doing here. That's been the biggest strength. As I said, meeting it was wonderful, and it genuinely was one of those moments where we just carried on the conversation. We never met in person, but we just carried on the conversations from here as if we hadn't met before. Rob just, you know, I was traveling the wrong way somewhere, just dashed in the car. We just carried on as if we've been the best mates forever. And that's what I'm feeling about this. It's that platform for sharing ideas. It's that platform for having a discussion when we don't necessarily agree with one another, but we're prepared to listen. And importantly, I think, often change those ideas, those misconceptions that have set in for the past 30 or 40 years. And it's a bit of a wake-up. It's certainly been a wake-up call for me when I've listened to people and thought, I've got that completely wrong. And I've always had it wrong. And that's been one of the most wonderful learning points. So not just meeting you all, but the learning as well. And Hans was making a point beforehand about sort of the dry academia sometimes and learning books. The best point is just to listen to someone. I've been very lucky this year to go to a series of games at Newbury. Rob and I went to a reenactment of Stalingrad in 54mm, and it was a completely bonkers game. But the discussion by a historian beforehand was fantastic. And I've witnessed some of those, and just listening to people passionate about what they're talking about, who've researched it fully and are prepared to accept ideas, to me has been genuinely eye-opening. It's just made me rethink and reignited passions for areas. I mean, World War II, I thought I'd just sort of lost the interest for, but this discussion about Stalingrad really made me rethink things. In fact, but just how much listening to someone who had deep knowledge had really invigorated me in a subject. So I think that's it, not necessarily where Rob and I thought this would ever go, but certainly that's, to me, that's been the highlight of this year. Rob, over to you.
Looking forward to 2024 in January, with Martin Boycott Brown is going to very kindly speak on the Battle of Ridley, which was fought in January, and making following up on comments from Hans Kull about difficulty of terrain and weather. In February, I hope, and April, we'd hope to have Hans Kull Weiss can finish off his exemplary introductions to the musket and building our knowledge of the musket, and its influence on tactics and battalion formations and opportunities. And that will inform us all as wargamers. My new friend, Mr. Gareth Glover, I hope to meet with him or have him on in March. Gareth's been promising us a range of fascinating activities, things that he's writing, wants to share. I'm going to ask our dear friend Mark Middleton, possibly in May, to talk about some of these exciting field activities. What's that like? That's just, and we had a good conversation at Leipzig about that, and it sounds fascinating. I got the opportunity to meet the amazing Dr. Stephen Summerfield, the editor of the Smoothbore Ordnance Journal. This gentleman has every possible detail about every artillery system, and writes extensively. He's got an extensive list of about 100 published books. Stephen is fascinating, so we might then ask Stephen over a series of activities. And out there in the wings, I've got Canadian and American friends Carl Paradis and Brent Oman, who design war games. Martin was specific in helping Carl Paradis design a 1796 game. I do have very fortunate to have good friend Keith Rocco, the artist and illustrator, who's doing some exemplary work at the moment. Mr. Chris Main, he's an American cuirassier reenactor on the American scene, and a significant part of the US's Brigade Napoleon. Our own and my own good friend Peter Cross, who is working with Scott Bowden on a very exciting 1815 project. It's a significant 5-volume work. So to step up and to support Scott Bowden's historical effort is just amazing. So there's all sorts of, as you said, Dominic, fantastic friends that we're going to connect with. And that's just, and that'll be just too much for next year, and we'll already begin to spill into 2025. I'm going to thank you, everyone, so far. Fascinating conversation, and I'm about to end our recording. But please stay online as we continue the chat. And to wrap up this month's Rally Point, thank you, everybody, sincerely for joining us. And next time, why not join us here at the Rally Point next January 2024 when we catch up with Martin Boycott Brown. So simply contact Dominic or I for your Zoom invite, and our details are at the end of the video. Share Rally Point with your friends so we can hear from them as well. Any previous Rally Point chats are up on the YouTube channel. And if you've enjoyed this Rally Point, please leave a simple review. So it's good morning from me, and it's good night from him. Dominic.
Good night.